Is that conquest talking? Sounds like brokenness to me. Sounds like weakness. Sounds like humility, if not contrition. We ended last time with the subject of slavery. Not the cartoon version of it, but the real thing. Not the evil that lies in a textbook or gets marched around on a talk show, but the ancient, undying wound that always wears a new face. One empire falls, another rises. The names change, the logos evolve, but the machinery of slavery, that never sleeps. And here's the real kicker. We rail against Columbus while sipping the products of companies that exploit human beings right now. We curse dead monarchs while bowing to living technocrats. We condemn the past with such smug certainty that we've forgotten how to recognize evil in the present. And in the shadows, the beast behind the curtain keeps grinning. Because while we're busy hating the wrong villain, he's still running the show. Condemn that one, I said to end last lesson, and I meant it. But if we're going to, then we must brace ourselves. Because the reckoning cuts both ways. You want to talk about slavery? Good. Then let's talk about all of it. Not just the sins of long-dead sailors. Not just the ships you've seen in school books. Let's talk about the chains we still can't see. The networks that never dissolved, they just keep changing their names. The crime syndicate that sold bodies on coasts now sells lies on the shores of your mind. It launders itself through philanthropy, props itself up with tech and treaties, and hides its trafficking under layers of plausible deniability. And here's the irony. The same people who tear down statues of Columbus worship the institutions who kept the real trade going. The chains aren't always iron. Sometimes they're ideology, sometimes convenience, sometimes silence. We stand in judgment over men long dead, but we skip the mirror. We name evil where it's safe to name it, never where it might cost us our place. But if we're going to be honest, if we're going to really condemn slavery, all slavery, then that means condemning the kind that enslaves the mind, that sells souls for approval, that rewrites the past to shield the present, that crucifies men twice, once in life and once in memory. So come with me. Let's take another look at the man they told us to hate. Let's read his words again. Let's weigh his wounds. Let's sit with his sorrow. And maybe, just maybe, let's ask if it's not conquest we're seeing, but contrition instead. Because remember this, Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon, was not just a sailor. He was a third-order Franciscan, a Catholic. He was betrayed, he was mistreated, and perhaps most of all in our case, misunderstood. Here's what we're doing in today's lesson. 1, we'll start by finishing up a few lines from the textbook, just to close that loop. Then we'll read from the textual concordance of the Douay Rheims Bible on 2 topics, human sacrifice and the blessing of humiliation. Next we'll read from a piece making the case for Columbus's sainthood. Yes, sainthood. Number 4, we'll hear the emotional closing lines of Columbus's own journal, his raw final reflections. And 5, along the way, we'll ask what it means to judge rightly, not with slogans, not with textbooks, not with state-sponsored education, but with the mind of the church, with the mind of Christ. Let's begin. From page 34 in the text. The stories of the conquistadors, as the Spanish conquerors were called, were for the most part ones of great dedication to the Catholic faith. These men were not conquerors of lands for the sake of power and fame, but first for the spread of Christianity to the natives. It seems proper to begin with the conquistador that opened the way for all the rest, Christopher Columbus. Although he had his flaws in civil administration, Columbus was a fervent third-order Franciscan. You are certainly familiar with the Franciscans, the order started by the great Saint Francis of Assisi. The third order of certain orders in the Catholic Church is a branch of those orders for laymen and laywomen. Columbus saw himself as opening the beauty of Christianity to myriads of people. He was born in Genoa, Italy in 1451, In his early 20s, he went off to sea, traveling to the East Indies down around Africa. Recall that the East Indies are what we would today call East and Southeast Asia. During these navigations, he began wondering if there was a faster way to get to these lands. For if there were, Christianity could be brought to them more easily. He developed an idea of sailing due west around the globe in order to reach the east. You can see this idea in the map shown here, which shows Columbus's idea of geography, shown in diagonal lines, on top of an accurate map. The red line represents Columbus's plan, by which he quite reasonably thought that in sailing southwest, he would arrive at the East Indies, China, Japan, etc. All those places which had been pagan souls to save. There were, however, two problems with his plan. A, he did not realize that North and South America exist, and would thus prevent his getting to the Indies. And B, he did not realize how wide the Pacific Ocean and the Earth really are. Notice that the red line goes directly through the Caribbean islands near Florida, just where he first landed, in fact. To put this plan into action, he would need missionary priests, money, men, supplies, and the general support of a Catholic monarch. He therefore went to various European courts trying to solicit support. They all were distrustful of Columbus's calculations of the distance. Turns out they were correct to doubt it. Only Isabella of Spain was interested in what the Italian had to offer. After some hesitation, Isabella granted him the finances and ships necessary for the expedition, as well as making him chief admiral, a very important and powerful officer of the Spanish Navy, which at the time was perhaps the most powerful navy in the world. Columbus clearly states the purpose of his mission in his journal, and we read much of that last time. Columbus's little fleet sailed out on August 3, 1492. After about 35 days, the men were very irritated and impatient at having seen nothing. Put yourself in their shoes. They were exploring hitherto unexplored territory, and there was no guarantee of ever seeing land. Finally, on October 11th, the feast of Our Lady of the Pillar, Columbus sighted and visited a small island, which he named San Salvador, which is one of the many islands which are today called the Bahama Islands, off the east coast of Florida. He then visited the island of Hispaniola, which today includes the nations Dominican Republic and Haiti. The natives he met appeared timid and harmless. However, they signaled to the Spanish that their northern neighbors were not so peaceful, and often took away captives, submitting them to cannibalism. It was during Columbus's second voyage that he encountered the other inhabitants of the Caribbean islands. Dr. Chunka, Columbus's doctor on the voyage, describes these Caribs. Quote, "These people raid the other islands and carry off all the women they can take, especially the young and beautiful, whom they keep as servants and concubines. The women say that they are treated with a cruelty that seems incredible. The Caribs eat the male children that they have by them, and only bring up the children by their own women. And as for the men they are able to capture, they bring those who are alive home to be slaughtered, and eat those who are dead on the spot. In one house, the neck of a man was found cooking in a pot. They use the boys they capture as servants until they are men. Then when they want to make a feast, they kill and eat them." Although many of the natives on the various islands he met were peaceful, yet many were not. All of this was the civilization the Spanish were out to reform. This was no easy task. Many Indians were often not docile to the Spanish work of evangelization and teaching. Columbus and his men were forced to attack the Indians with sword and gunfire, when they treacherously turned on the Spanish after their friendly measures. It was during his third voyage that Columbus realized he was not in India, the East Indies, for he said, "I have come to believe that this is a mighty continent, which was hitherto unknown." The use of the word Indian to refer to the natives of the Caribbean is the result of a mistake in trying to understand Columbus's poor Spanish grammar. Remember, he was a native Italian, not a Spaniard. In fact, the word for India used at that time was Hindustan. Columbus would make 4 total voyages to the New World. An often heard slander of Columbus and the Spanish in general is that the voyages to the Americas were taken up primarily for the sake of acquiring the natives' gold. Though seeking wealth was indeed an important part of the mission, this goal never took precedence over the central mission of evangelization. The reasons for this quest for gold were twofold. On the one hand, the voyages themselves took much financing, which was hard on the Spanish treasury, which was dangerously empty after the many years of battle with the Spanish Moors, the Muslims. It was also just that the Spanish should use the gold found in the new lands, for the Spanish themselves worked untiringly and spent great resources for the sake of the natives. Can you imagine how much it took to feed and pay sailors and throngs of Spanish soldiers to guard against the pagan natives? More importantly, the reconquest of the Holy Land from the Moors was the next project the great Spanish monarchs were contemplating. Columbus had this same goal, as he himself states, quote, "I hope I will find a barrel of gold, for which these people have traded, and that they will have found the gold mine and the spices, and in such quantities that within 3 years the sovereigns will prepare for and undertake the reconquest of the Holy Land. I have already petitioned your highnesses to see that all the profits of my enterprise should be spent on the conquest of Jerusalem. And your highnesses smiled and said that, even without the expedition, they had the inclination to do it." We see from this quotation that not only Columbus, but also Spanish Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand were on fire for the conversion of souls and for great Catholic causes, such as the recovery of the Holy Lands from the infidel Muslims. Thus, except for the few greedy Spanish nobles who only wanted gold, the official policy of Spain was never simply for a desire for gold for its own sake. As an aside from the textbook, these motives will be very different from what we'll see in the English when the English came over to colonize America. And to piggyback onto that, back in the textbook, in a fast-forward box it reads, "Yet the easily proven facts about Columbus, taken from his own writings, do not stop modern slanderers from destroying his reputation and merits. Today, as the world grows darker and darker, we see our Lord's enemies scurrying to undo anything Columbus or anything colonial Spanish. Do not be fooled. At the bottom of it all is a hatred of anything Catholic. The modern world hates real Catholicism. Quote, 'Wonder not, brethren, if the world hates you,' warned our Lord. First Epistle of John 3:15. Here is just one example. In 1934, under pressure from Catholic Americans, U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proclaimed Columbus Day, October 12th, as a federal holiday. Our country has been celebrating it every year since. Likewise, there are similar national holidays celebrating Columbus's greatness in South American countries, Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, and more. Today, however, some 80 years later, there is a well-organized effort underway to remove these holidays in both the U.S. and South America. A typical slogan of these lying slanderers is, "Abolish Columbus Day," and instead have solidarity with indigenous peoples. In other words, let us throw off all things Catholic and go back to that great culture of the cannibalistic pagans. Using old, long-disproven lies, these zealots indoctrinate young children, especially in public schools, and continue this training all the way up through college-age youth in our liberal universities. Of course, the great Spanish Queen Isabella is also dragged into the mud along with Columbus. The world will need well-informed students of true history, as we hope you will be, to defend the truth, to defend the Catholic faith, to defend our Lord himself. One excellent source to defend Columbus is for you to someday as an adult read Columbus's original writings about his 4 voyages in a book called The 4 Voyages of Christopher Columbus. In the year 2020, a black Minneapolis man, George Floyd, was murdered at the hands of a white police officer. Rioters and mobs across the U.S. protested, some peacefully and others violently. During some of these protests, they toppled, desecrated, and destroyed Catholic statues, such as that of Father Junipero Serra and Christopher Columbus. Catholics peacefully praying the rosary near Catholic statues were attacked by mobs. After the first 2 lessons, I think that can provide a nice little summation of the things we've talked about. There certainly is more, but in my effort to stay rooted in the textbook, I wanted to finish that up there. Next, I want to look at the textual concordance of the Douay-Rheims Bible, in particular 2 topics, one being human sacrifice, since it was so prevalent back in Columbus's day, back in a time when Columbus was fighting a whole lot more than people talk about now in trying to spread the faith to the natives, and not only that, but trying to protect the natives in a natural way, protect their livelihoods, protect their children, protect their families. There are many, many scripture passages on God's abhorrence of human sacrifices, and I want to read a few to you here. This first one is from Deuteronomy. Thou shalt not do in like manner to the Lord thy God, for they have done to their gods all the abominations which the Lord abhorreth, offering their sons and daughters, and burning them with fire. The next one is from the Psalms. And they sacrificed their sons and their daughters to devils, and they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and of their daughters, which they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood, and was defiled with their works. And they went aside after their own inventions. And the Lord was exceedingly angry with his people, and he abhorred his inheritance. The final one is from the Book of Wisdom. For those ancient inhabitants of thy holy land, whom thou didst abhor, because they did works hateful to thee by their sorceries and wicked sacrifices, and those merciless murderers of their own children, and eaters of men's bowels, and devourers of blood from the midst of thy consecration, and those parents sacrificing with their own hands helpless souls, it was thy will to destroy by the hands of our parents. Before I get to the passages on the blessing of humiliation, I want to show you just a short portion of this video from VaticanCatholic.com that deals with this human sacrifice issue back in Columbus's day. If we see these things in the Bible, that God abhorred it, and he took that land from the Canaanites and gave it to his chosen people, how do we believe he felt about those human sacrificers back in Columbus's day? Do you think he sided with the human sacrificers, the human torturers? Or do you think he sided with those natives who were innocent, who were the prey of these predators, and in fact being saved by Columbus's men? Think about this. We tend to group all natives together into one pack, but it wasn't like that at all. There were tribes, many of them, warring tribes. Many were innocent, many were not. Here is that video. This is not at all for child consumption.
I talked about how frequently they sacrificed humans to their false gods and how they would do it, how they would kick them down the temple steps after they pulled out the still beating heart from the person's chest. One point I did not mention was the appalling fact that these Aztecs would sometimes skin their sacrificial victim, skin his face off, and then wear the person's face. In his book Cortez, Richard Lee Marks describes it on pages 209 and 210. He says, quote, "Such flaying of human beings, which was not uncommon among the Indians, would be done just after the victims had been sacrificed, and Indian priests would wear the face skins while the skins were slippery with blood and body fluids. At such moments, like the moments of human sacrifice, the mental, emotional, and spiritual state of the Indians was beyond the comprehension of Europeans." End quote. As the Spaniards encountered the brutality of the Aztecs' religious practices, they were baffled.
Would you say that people killed in this manner are worth defending, are worth fighting over? Think about it. Now I want to read several passages that involve enduring humiliations, because what we'll see shortly is a man who felt humiliated, who felt broken, who felt he had hit rock bottom. These are things that are pleasing to God. These are most certainly things as well that are not elevated, that are not praised, that are not honored in this American society. We say we'll carry the cross with Christ, but do we actually do it? Right here in the Bible are several passages that sing the praises of humiliation with Christ. The first is from Job. "For he that hath been humbled shall be in glory, and he that shall bow down his eyes shall be saved." The second is from Psalms. "For thou hast humbled us in the place of affliction, and the shadow of death hath covered us." Another psalm. "I am poor, and in labors from my youth, and being exalted, have been humbled and troubled. Another psalm. We have rejoiced for the days in which thou hast humbled us, for the years in which we have seen evils. Another psalm. The Lord is the keeper of little ones. I was humbled, and he delivered me. Another psalm. Be thou mindful of thy word to thy servant, in which thou hast given me hope. This hath comforted me in my humiliation, because thy word hath enlivened me. Psalm. Before I was humbled, I offended. Therefore have I kept thy word. Psalm. It is good for me that thou hast humbled me, that I may learn thy justifications. Psalm. I know, O Lord, that thy judgments are equity, and in thy truth thou hast humbled me. Psalm. I have been humbled, O Lord, exceedingly. Quicken thou me according to thy word. Psalm. I am very young and despised, but I forget not thy justifications. Psalm. See my humiliation and deliver me, for I have not forgotten thy law. Proverbs. It is better to be humbled with the meek than to divide spoils with the proud. Proverbs. Before destruction, the heart of a man is exalted, and before he be glorified, it is humbled. Ecclesiasticus. Take all that shall be brought upon thee, and in thy sorrow endure, and in thy humiliation keep patience. For gold and silver are tried in the fire, but acceptable men in the furnace of humiliation. 1 Peter. Be you humbled, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in the time of visitation. The book goes on to have other topics that are not exactly the word humiliation. Next in line is humility, and there are literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 subtitles on humility. The first one is humility itself. 2, humility pleasing to God. 3, humility necessity of. 4, humility reward of. 5, humility motives or reasons for. 6, humility exhortation to. 7, humility of Christ. 8, humility examples of. And finally, humility, a prayer of. All of this goes from pages 219 to 224, all having to do with humiliation, humility. I'll read one more. This one is under humility, and it's Jesus' own words. And Jesus said to them, For he that is the lesser among you, he is the greater. That's from Luke chapter 9. Humility is pleasing to God. Sacred humiliation, not humiliation for fake humility's sake. Sacred humiliation, where we join our sufferings to Christ. Those are pleasing to God's. And I want you to think about that today as we continue this lesson with the end of the recording from last week. It was supposed to be part of lesson 5, and I decided to split them in half. Think about these things. Think about humility. Think about humiliation. Think about the cross. Think about everything we've talked about in all of these lessons and the motive of the Spanish explorers to convert the natives to Jesus Christ. They felt they had a call. Columbus felt he had that call. And how low did he get at times? Read with me the end of Columbus's journal, The Fourth Journey. Who could believe that a poor foreigner would have risen against your highness in such a place without any motive or argument on his side, without even the assistance of any other prince upon which to rely, but on the contrary, amongst your own vassals and natural subjects, and with my son staying at your royal court? I was 28 years old when I came into your highness's service, and now I have not a hair upon me that is not gray. My body is infirm, and all that was left to me, as well as to my brothers, has been taken away and sold, even to the frock that I wore, to my great dishonor. I cannot but believe that this was done without your royal permission. The restitution of my honor, the reparation of my losses, and the punishment of those who have inflicted them will redound to the honor of your royal character. A similar punishment also is due to those who plundered me of my pearls, and who have brought a disparagement upon the privileges of my admiralty. Great and unexampled will be the glory and fame of your highnesses if you do this, and the memory of your highnesses as just and grateful sovereigns will survive as a bright example to Spain in future ages. The honest devotedness I have always shown to your Majesty's service, and the so unmerited outrage with which it has been repaid, will not allow my soul to keep silence, however much I may wish it. I implore your highnesses to forgive my complaints. I am indeed in as ruined a condition as I have related. Hitherto I have wept over others. May heaven have mercy upon me, and may the earth weep for me. With regard to temporal things, I have not even a blanca for an offering. And in spiritual things, I have ceased here in the Indies from observing the prescribed forms of religion. Solitary in my trouble, sick, and in daily expectation of death, surrounded by 1,000,000 of hostile savages full of cruelty, and thus separated from the blessed sacraments of our holy church, how will my soul be forgotten if it be separated from the body in this foreign land? Weep for me, whoever has charity, truth, and justice. I did not come out on this voyage to gain to myself honor or wealth. This is a certain fact, for at that time all hope of such a thing was dead. I do not lie when I say that I went to your highnesses with honest purpose of heart and sincere zeal in your cause. I humbly beseech your highnesses that if it please God to rescue me from this place, you will graciously sanction my pilgrimage to Rome and other holy places. May the Holy Trinity protect your highnesses' lives and add to the prosperity of your exalted position. Done in the Indies, in the island of Jamaica, on the 7th of July, in the year 1503. Is that conquest talking? Sounds like brokenness to me. Sounds like weakness. Sounds like humility, if not contrition. I am reminded of Jesus' words in the Beatitude. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall possess the land. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Maybe, just maybe, it's in these moments of brokenness that we see the real Columbus. Not the myth, not the monster, but the man. A man who really believed the world was under Satan's grip. A man who really believed the gospel could change that. And a man who endured mockery, storms, betrayal, and injustice because he wanted to see the cross of Christ fly over new shores. Saint Christopher Columbus? Andrew Ganner wouldn't think so. But here's an interesting article to consider. Even most Catholics today do not realize that a number of fathers of the First Vatican Council actually submitted a papal petition for Columbus's canonization. Another Columbus Day has passed. The usual suspects in their secular and now sadly even Catholic media have trotted out their yearly calumnies of the man whom America still, to her credit, honors with a national holiday. There is still no better response to this year's spectacle of hatred toward Columbus than the following statement of Reverend A. Knight from 1877. Quote, "The disapproval of the infidel press is to Catholics a guarantee of the goodness of a cause, second only to an autograph letter of the Holy Father." Although many are familiar with the ridiculous and hyperbolic novel charges against Christopher Columbus from the left, few Catholics know that a number of fathers of the First Vatican Council actually submitted a petition for Columbus's canonization to the Pope. In addition to being a famous explorer and discoverer of the New World, it seems the amazing virtues of Columbus the man are still little known to contemporary Catholics. The following selections first appeared in an article on Christopher Columbus in the Month in Catholic Review of 1876 by the Reverend A. Knight. Below, the Reverend Knight tells the story of the petition for canonization, how St. Christopher is tied to Columbus, and the reasons favorable to a canonization. Without further ado, I give you the Reverend A. Knight. A petition for the introduction of the cause of Columbus's canonization has been numerously signed by fathers of the Vatican Council, wherein it is declared that the services of Christopher Columbus of Genoa in the propagation of the faith are unparalleled, that his earthly recompense was calumny, insult, and personal ill treatment, that the Holy See from the first befriended him, and that Pius IX is the only pope who has set foot in America. It is added that Count Wrestle has vindicated the memory of Christopher Columbus and has manifested his supernal vocation and high virtues, especially his Catholic zeal, and that an ardent desire is felt that the public honors of the Church should be decreed by the Holy See to the Christian hero. Cardinal Donat is mentioned as having already sued for the introduction of the cause exceptionale. It is stated that Europe, Asia, Africa, and America share the movement, that the lapse of time has interposed some technical difficulties, but that these ought to be overridden in a case which has no precedent. An extract from a translation which appeared in the tablet, August 19, 1876, of a letter addressed to the Holy Father by Cardinal Donat, Archbishop of Bordeaux, writing, as he in the course of the letter says, in his character of Metropolitan of part of the Antilles and member of the Sacred Congregation of Rites, will perhaps best explain the drift of the document and the state of the question. He says, this is Cardinal Donat, urged on by a secret inspiration from on high, and encouraged by the gracious sympathy of your holiness, he, one of the most illustrious writers of France, the Count Wrestle, gave us a new history of Christopher Columbus, in which he refuted all the calumnies heaped up by previous historians and proved to demonstration that the discovery of the New World was preeminently the work of God, and held up to our admiration Christopher Columbus as a providential man, a messenger of heaven prepared by especial graces for the accomplishment of his especial mission. Thus both Europe and America have been moved by these revelations of history, which invest the celebrated navigator with a supernatural splendor. The facts and documents on which the impartial historian has based his account are so numerous and so conclusive that they have carried conviction to the mind even of writers separated indeed from Catholic unity, but guided by the love of truth alone. This conviction, Holy Father, has become in a short time so strong that a large number of the fathers of the Vatican Council have voluntarily affixed their signatures to the petition for the introduction of the cause. The solemn expression of their desires would have been presented to the Council itself had not the grave events which have agitated Europe supervened to cause the suspension of the labors of that august assembly. Is it then likely that Columbus will ever be Saint Christopher, second of that name? If it be not prediction and accomplishment, it is a coincidence worth noticing that the legend of the original Saint Christopher symbolizes so beautifully the achievement of his namesake. Columbus, saint or not, was a giant, and he carried Christ across the water. There are, it must be admitted, on all bands, abundant materials in the life of Columbus of the kind with which we are familiar in the lives of the saints. Very much earnestness of purpose, deep religious convictions, superhuman labors, incredible sufferings, lofty enthusiasm, grand achievements, and disgrace and dereliction. St. Francis Xavier left to die alone under the trees on a little deserted island. Columbus passing away absolutely unnoticed amid the rejoicings of a royal marriage, the history of the Church, is full of such examples, from the days of John the Baptist, who was put to death to please a dancing girl. The greatest reward of God's gift is martyrdom, and the next greatest is to meet with ingratitude. Protestant historians like Washington Irving may well be excused if they fail to discern in the undertaking of Columbus the marks of a divine commission, when his Catholic contemporaries seemed so little conscious of any such hypothesis. No doubt there were good reasons for their reticence. It was natural for them to shrink from publishing their shame, and it was more pleasant to suppress, if possible, in silence, the unworthy treatment of a noble soul, which rouses indignation, even now after 4 centuries. It is fair to consider also that contemporaries cannot see in one comprehensive glance, as their descendants can, the harmonious connection of the various incidents that go to form a great career. Writers of saints' lives understand that their main business is to dive beneath the surface and trace, if possible, the subtle action of divine grace. But essayists and historians are usually content to deal with facts and the visible course of affairs and the working of political motives and the external manifestations of natural character, and seldom venture into the inner worlds of souls, or care to estimate the bearing of temporal action upon eternal destinies, and the true value before God and his angels of the words and deeds under consideration. If Washington Irving had been Catholic, he might still have failed to detect the signs of sanctity in a career which certainly owed much of its splendid success to the power of human genius and indomitable will. Lofty enthusiasm may be natural impulse, not the inspiration of heaven. Deep religious conviction may be the result of early education. Great sufferings and startling reverses are found even among the unregenerate. To Catholics, a few proofs of genuine humility in the hour of glory, of meekness under persecution, of tender devotion to our Blessed Lady, of sensitive regard for purity, would go farther to make known a messenger of God and a child of grace than any number of great results or assemblage of brilliant qualities. Tried by so many a standard of canonization, will the life of a Lord High Admiral, holding command over rough sailors and mutinous subjects, reach the required immaculateness? Mild words and gentle treatment would scarcely avail to keep in order the fierce spirits of the Spanish Main. It is at all events a fact that he was never known to swear, and it is certain that many saints, even quatales, have contrived, like Saint Bernard and Saint Anthony of Padua, to awe into tame submission to their will the fiercest tyrants with their robber bands behind them. Saint Gregory VII could use imperious tones and deal hard blows, and his worst enemies did not accuse him of weakness. Saint John in the Apocalypse puts cowards out of heaven, and Rome does not canonize feebleness or inertia. Columbus certainly bears on all hands a high character. About his general honesty of purpose and deep sense of religion, there has never been a doubt since the petty jealousies of personal ill will were hushed in death. Prescott says, quote, "Whatever were the defects of his mental constitution, the finger of the historian will find it difficult to point to a single blemish in his moral character. His correspondence breathes the sentiment of devoted loyalty to his sovereigns. His conduct habitually displayed the utmost solicitude for the interests of his followers. He expended almost his last maravedi in restoring his unfortunate crew to their native land. His dealings were regulated by the nicest principles of honor and justice. His last communication to the sovereigns from the Indies remonstrates against the use of violent measures in order to extract gold from the natives as a thing equally scandalous and impolitic. The grand object to which he dedicated himself seemed to expand his whole soul and raised it above the petty shifts and artifices by which great ends are sometimes sought to be compassed. There are some men in whom rare virtues have been closely allied, if not to positive vice, to degrading weakness. Columbus's character presented no such incongruity. Whether we contemplate it in its public or private relations, in all its features it wears the same noble aspect. It was in perfect harmony with the grandeur of his plans and their results, more stupendous than those which heaven has permitted any other mortal to achieve. Maybe we're asking the wrong question when we ask whether Columbus was a hero or not. Because in the modern mind, hero means infallible, victorious, above all sin. But in the Catholic mind, that's never been true. Our saints were tortured, mocked, misunderstood, just like Christ. Sometimes they even fell. In Mary Magdalene's case, how many demons were inside her? Thank God I'm Catholic, because Catholicism lifts up the broken in a way no other faith base does, has, or ever will. What made those people heroic wasn't perfection. It was perseverance. It was repentance. It was penance. It was tears over their own wretchedness. I've cried those tears. This is why you have non-Catholics who will claim their own sins are made clean with Christ's blood in a never-ending sin-fest way. Once saved, always saved. But in the next breath, condemn Catholics for their own sins of the past, based on either blindness to their own wooden beam in their own eye, or an enormous error in the evaluation of the importance of our own contrition for those sins. they'll call it works or something we have to do to earn God's forgiveness. Well, if that's the case, why do they not apply the same standard and treatment and mercy to the Catholic who has sins in his own closet? Think about that. We've all experienced this. Besides, as St. Augustine, he of our two cities and two loves theme, once said, quote, "It is commanded that we live uprightly, and in fact this reward has been offered, that we merit to live blessedly forever. But who can live uprightly and do good works without having been made righteous by faith? It is commanded that we believe so that, having received the gift of the Holy Spirit through love, we may be able to do good works." What made the Catholics of Columbus's time heroic wasn't conquest or the work they did to evangelize. It was Christ and the faith in him behind the evangelization. And think about how broken Christ allowed himself to be for us. Think about the crown he wore before the one he wears now, the one of thorns. This is a major piece so many people don't understand about us. So maybe Columbus isn't a hero the way Superman is. But maybe, just maybe, he's something else. Something even greater. Maybe he's a man chosen by God, flawed but faithful, who gave everything he had to carry the gospel to all those in darkness. Not a colonizer with the wrong intentions, not a cartoon, but a Catholic. And if that's true, well then it's not just Columbus's name we've forgotten. It's our own. And it's a memory we have to recover, and recover fast. Now wouldn't that be super?